My name is Elias Monroe, and on the night of June 18th, 2014, my life changed forever. Up until that point, I had never given much thought to what happens after death. It was an abstract idea, something distant, something applied to other people, older people, sick people, people who had lived their full lives. But not to me. Death was a concept, not a reality. I wasn't religious. I wasn't an atheist either. I was just someone who lived his life day by day, working hard, paying my bills, go out with friends when I had the chance. That was enough for me. I figured if there was a God, he would understand. After all, I wasn't a bad person. I didn't steal, didn't hurt people, didn't live a life of crime. I had made my share of mistakes, sure, but so did everyone. I thought that if there was some kind of judgment, my good would outweigh my bad. I assumed that whatever was waiting beyond this life, if anything at all, it wouldn't be too concerned with someone like me. That night started just like any other. I had spent the entire day at the warehouse where I worked, clocking in extra hours because the paychecks never seemed to stretch far enough. My body was aching, my head was pounding, but all I could think about was getting home, eating something, and passing out in bed. I remember stopping at a gas station on the way home, grabbing an energy drink to keep me awake. The roads were empty, just me and the occasional pair of headlights in the distance. I turned up the radio, trying to shake off the exhaustion creeping in. My eyelids felt heavy, and in hindsight, I should have pulled over, should have rested for a bit, but I was so close to home, just 20 more minutes. And then, in an instant, everything changed. Out of nowhere, a set of headlights blinded me. A truck swerving straight into my lane. I barely had time to register what was happening before the sound of screeching tires and twisting metal filled my ears. The impact was violent, a force I had never felt before. My body was weightless for a second, then everything spun, flipped, crunched, and then, just as suddenly as it happened, there was silence. At first, I thought I was still in the car, that I was somehow awake, disoriented, maybe in shock. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't sitting in my driver's seat anymore. I was floating. I looked down and saw the wreckage below, saw my car completely mangled, barely recognizable. And then I saw myself. My body was still in the car, slumped against the shattered glass of the windshield, blood trickling from my forehead. My arms hung limply at my sides, my chest unnaturally still. It was the strangest thing. I was looking at myself, yet I felt no pain, no weight, no breath, no heartbeat. Panic set in. This wasn't real. This had to be a dream. But no matter how hard I willed myself to wake up, I didn't. I was trapped in this strange in-between, hovering above the scene, unable to move beyond it. Then I heard voices, faint at first, then growing louder. I turned, expecting to see paramedics, maybe a group of bystanders. But there was no one there, just darkness creeping at the edges of my vision, a blackness that seemed to pulse and shift, alive in a way that made my skin crawl. The voices grew clearer, and my stomach twisted at what I heard. They were laughing. Whispers slithered around me, filled with amusement, filled with malice. They weren't human. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. These voices belonged to something else, something ancient, something that had been waiting for me. A cold terror gripped me as I felt myself being pulled downward. I tried to resist, but the more I struggled, the stronger the force became. It wasn't gravity. It was something else entirely, something unnatural. My mind screamed in denial. This couldn't be happening. Hell wasn't real. None of this was real. And yet, as the darkness wrapped around my limbs, dragging me deeper into the abyss, I knew that I was wrong. Just as I thought I was lost, a voice thundered through the void. A single word, spoken with authority so powerful that the darkness itself recoiled. Stop. The grip on me shattered instantly. The whispers fell silent. The laughter cut off. And then a light burst forth, piercing through the darkness like fire through paper. It wasn't just light. It was a presence, overwhelming and all-consuming. And standing at its center was him, Jesus. I had never seen him before, never given much thought to what he might look like. But in that moment, I knew. There was no doubt, no question. He was light itself, power and peace wrapped into one. His gaze locked onto mine, and in an instant, I felt exposed. Every thought I had ever had, every choice I had ever made, every secret I had buried deep inside myself. It was all laid bare before him. I expected him to be angry. I expected him to cast me aside, to let the darkness take me because I had never sought him, never acknowledged him. But instead, he looked at me with something I never could have expected. Love. It was too much. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed, unworthy. My soul trembled under the weight of his presence, and I couldn't even bring myself to speak. Elias, he said, and just hearing him say my name sent a wave of warmth through me, like sunlight breaking through the coldest winter. Do you know why you're here? I couldn't answer. I didn't know. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. Without warning, my life played out before me. But it wasn't like watching a movie. It was more than that. I was reliving every moment, every decision, every conversation. And I wasn't just seeing them, I was feeling them. Every time I had hurt someone with my words, I felt their pain as if it were my own. Every selfish choice I had made, I saw the ripple effects, the ways they had shaped my life and the lives of others. Every time I had ignored someone in need, I saw the weight of what that indifference had done. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The truth was undeniable, and I had to face it. I had wasted my life. Jesus wasn't condemning me. He wasn't punishing me. He was showing me the truth I had ignored, the truth I had refused to see. Then the vision changed. I saw a world unlike anything I had ever known. A world on the brink of something catastrophic. People running in terror. Cities crumbling. Fire raining from the sky. It wasn't just a war or a natural disaster. It was something else. Something spiritual. I saw beings, shadow-like figures, moving among the people, whispering in their ears, leading them further into destruction. And then I saw people reaching out to the heavens, crying for help, but the sky remained silent. I turned to Jesus. What is this? My voice trembled. "This is what is coming," he said. A cold dread filled my stomach. Can't they be saved? Jesus' eyes were filled with sorrow. They have chosen their path. I wanted to argue, to plead for them, to say they didn't know. But deep down I understood people had the chance, just like I did. And just like me, they had ignored it. The scene shifted again, and I found myself standing at the edge of a great abyss. A darkness so deep it had no end. A pit filled with cries, with screams, with voices calling out for another chance. I recognized some of them. People I had known. People who had laughed with me, worked with me, shared meals with me. People who had lived their lives just as I had, never thinking about what came after. I wanted to step back, but the ground beneath me felt fragile, like one wrong move would send me tumbling into the void. A hand gripped my shoulder. I turned back to Jesus, and he pulled me away. I gasped, my whole being shaking. "Why did you show me this?" "Because you need to understand," he said. "You were on this path." Jesus' words echoed in my mind, wrapping around me like chains I couldn't break. I had been on that path. I had lived my life as if nothing mattered beyond the here and now, convinced that I had time, that death was some distant reality I wouldn't have to face until I was old and gray. But I had been wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. And now, I was being shown the consequences of my choices in a way that was impossible to ignore. The scene around us shifted again, and I found myself standing before what I can only describe as a massive, ancient book. It was bound in something that looked like gold but shimmered with a light of its own. As I watched it open on its own, its pages flipping as if guided by an unseen hand. I didn't have to ask what it was. Deep down, I already knew. The book of life. Jesus stood beside me, silent as the pages turned, revealing names inscribed in glowing letters. Some names shone brilliantly, like stars carved into the surface of the pages. Others were faded, barely visible, as if they were being erased. And then there were those that were missing entirely. A cold fear gripped me as I scanned the pages. I knew what I was looking for, my name, but no matter how many pages turned, I didn't see it. My knees buckled beneath me, and I felt the weight of my own existence pressing down on me like never before. My name, I whispered, "It's not here." Jesus looked at me, his expression filled with something I couldn't describe. Sadness, yes, but also something deeper. Love. A love so pure, so undeserved that it shattered me. "Elias," he said gently, "you never chose me." I wanted to argue. I wanted to protest, to say that I hadn't been a bad person, but the words wouldn't come, because I knew the truth. I had spent my entire life ignoring him. I had lived for myself, never giving a thought to what lay beyond the world I could see. I had assumed that if God was real, he would understand, that he would look at my life and decide I was good enough. But that's not how it worked. I looked at the glowing names, at the ones that had begun to fade, and finally at the blank spaces where names should have been. What happens to them? My voice barely rose above a whisper. Jesus turned the page, and I saw a great separation. The ones whose names glowed, whose faith had been real, were gathered together in a place so beautiful I could hardly comprehend it. A city of light, of joy, of complete unity with God. It was everything the soul longed for, everything we had been created for. But then the image shifted, and I saw the others, those whose names had been missing or fading. They were on the outside, reaching, crying out, but the doors had closed. The reality of it hit me like a thunderclap. This wasn't about who had been good or bad by human standards. It was about relationship, about choice. Some had chosen God, and others had chosen themselves. And once that final moment came, once the door was closed, there were no more chances. Tears burned my eyes as I turned to Jesus. Is there any way back for them? His expression was solemn. Not once the time is up. I thought of all the people I had known, my family, my friends, people I had worked with, people I had laughed with, people who, just like me, had gone through life without a second thought about what came after. I had never warned them. I had never told them to seek the truth. And now, I didn't know if they would make it. The weight of it crushed me. Take me back, I pleaded. Please, give me another chance. Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder. That is why you are here. You have been given a chance that many do not receive. What will you do with it? Everything faded in an instant, and I gasped as I felt my body again. I woke up to the sound of screaming. My own. The pain was unbearable, as if my entire body had been ripped apart and hastily put back together. Blinding lights hovered above me, and I realized I was in a hospital room, doctors and nurses scrambling around me. My mother was there, tears streaming down her face as she gripped my hand. Elias, she choked out. Oh, my baby, you came back. I had been dead for 13 minutes. The next few weeks were a blur. My body recovered, but my soul was forever changed. Nothing in this world mattered the same way anymore. Money, success, entertainment, it all felt empty. I had seen eternity, had come face to face with Jesus himself. I had been on the edge of eternal separation from him, and I had been given a second chance. But the world around me, it was still blind. People walked around every day as if life would go on forever, as if they had all the time in the world. Just like I had, I couldn't stay silent. At first, people didn't believe me. My friends thought I had suffered brain damage. My family thought I was going through some kind of trauma response. But I knew the truth. I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't ignore it. Some listened, some laughed, and some walked away from me entirely. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the ones who did listen, the ones who asked questions, the ones who, for the first time in their lives, started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong about what comes after death. And maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to make things right before the door closed for them. 2. So now I ask you, are you ready? Have you made the choice? Because one day, whether tomorrow or years from now, your time will come. And in that moment, you won't be able to change your decision. You won't be able to plead for more time. You won't be able to undo a life spent ignoring the truth. The time to decide is now. Jesus is waiting, but he won't wait forever. What will you choose?